Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Matt, and today we are brewing a Kettle Sour. I've never brewed a Kettle Sour before, and I'm really excited to get going on this. This is actually going to be inspired by a Midwest fruit tart I've tried recently from a brewery down in Ohio. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that soon. Anyway, guys, if you like Grain to Glass videos, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I also added merchandise, so if you're interested in supporting my channel, check out the merch store down below in the description. I also have channel memberships as well, and I want to thank all the members who chose to become a member on my channel. Anyway, guys, we're going to jump right into the Beersmith 3 notes, and then we're going to jump right into the brew. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I have never made a sour before, and I recently tried Urban Artifacts Polygraph, which is a Midwest fruit tart made with tart cherries, and I loved it so much I wanted to try to use that as my inspiration going into this beer. As I said, I have never done a sour before, so I used Hops and Gnarly's video over a Midwest fruit tart as a guide for this video, so I will post that video down in the information section below. I'd highly recommend you subscribe to his channel and also check out his video on the Midwest fruit tart. The big difference between a Midwest fruit tart and just a fruited sour is that you're supposed to use a ton of fresh fruit in this, and that's what makes it unique. You're supposed to use around 3 pounds of fruit per gallon of beer, but I did not want to spend $250 to $300 for this keg, so we only opted to add around 1 pound of puree per gallon just purely to save cost. Still, with planning this recipe, it was still over $100 for this keg, so it's still the most expensive brew I've had to date. Now to break down the recipe, I am shooting for 6.2 gallons. The main reason is because I am estimating that there's going to be at least 1 gallon of loss when it comes to the fermenter because of the cherry puree. So we're shooting for 6.2 gallons in the fermenter. For the malt bill, it's going to be fairly simple, with 88% of the grist being pale malt 2-row and 11% being flaked oats for body. For the hops, this isn't really too important since the fruit is really what's in charge here, but we're just doing 0.6 ounces of Hallertau Blanc. For the Lacto strain, we're using Lacto Brevis. We opted for this strain because this is just what was available to me at the time. And for the yeast, we're using Loki from Imperial yeast as well. And this is a Quake strain that will help promote some fruity and tropical notes. For the starter information, it's saying that we need around 400 billion cells, which we're not going to have since I'm not planning a starter. It's Quake, so Quake can be stressed, so I'm not too concerned. For the water chemistry, this is the water chemistry we're shooting for. It's higher on the sulfates to chloride, around 2 to 1, and this will help to promote a dry finish. Next, we're going to jump into the brew day. First, we double crushed our grains. Next, we measured out our brewing salts. We measured 3.8 grams of gypsum, 3 grams of Epsom salt, 2.4 grams of calcium chloride, 0.4 grams of canning salt, 0.45 milliliters of lactic acid. Next, we mashed in. After 15 minutes of mashing, we took a pH reading and it measured out a bit too high at 5.4. We went ahead and added 2 more milliliters of lactic acid to get the mash down. After a 60-minute mash and a 10-minute mash out, we raised the grain basket to drain the grains. For sparging, I just went ahead and dumped some room temperature water over the grains to rinse them. Our pre-boil gravity measured out to around 1066, so our mash efficiency was around 75%. Next, we raised the temperature of the wort to pasteurize the wort for quick souring. We also sanitized the pumps, line, and chiller. We also add 2 grams of yeast nutrient to assist with the lactose souring process. Per the lactose strain we are using, it has a preferred temperature of 90 degrees, so that's what we chill to. Once the wort has been pasteurized, we take an initial pH reading. We need to pre-acidify for the lacto to 4.6. I just guessed on this, opting to make small additions and just take measurements. It took quite a bit of lacto to drop it. After the wort was chilled and the wort was pre-acidified, we pitched our lacto from Imperial yeast. We opted to keep everything in the kettle to sour. We just set the controller to 90 degrees and wrapped the kettle with cling wrap to keep the oxygen out. After 3 days, we checked it and it measured out to 3.7, which was still too high. After 3 days, we checked out the wort and this is what it looked like. It didn't look too bad, honestly. After 5 days, it has seemed to have stalled at 3.5, so we opted to use lactic acid to drop it down to 3.4. Once we hit 3.4, we started the boil and we added 0.6 ounces of Hallertau Blanc for 60 minutes. This was our only hop addition. We also added another 2 grams at the last 15 minutes of the boil to help with fermentation. We opted to use Flaked to help clarify the beer. After a 60-minute boil, we run boiling wort through the pumps, line, and chiller to sanitize the equipment once again. Once the wort has dropped to around 90 degrees, we move the wort to a sanitized fermenter and aerate with a drill stir stick. After the wort has been aerated, we pitch our Loki from Imperial yeast. After temperature correction, our OG measured to around 1067, which was only 1 point under our pre-boil gravity. After 2 days in the fermenter at high Krausen, we added 6 pounds of Tart cherry puree. We tried to not splash this while pouring this into the fermenter. After another 3 days, fermentation was complete, and this is what it looked like. There was a lot of sediment, and it was still very cloudy, which was expected. We had to use a racking cane since there was so much sediment. We did purge the keg with CO2 and tried not to splash the beer in the keg. Our final gravity measured out to around 1015, which was on target. Our ABV was around 7%. Okay, so we are at the end of the video where we talk about the brew day, and then we also go over tasting notes at the end of the video. So first of all, I want to give a shout out to Brian from Michigan Brews. We've been chatting on Discord a lot. He's been helping me with my souring questions as I was doing the lacto souring process. I definitely had a few questions, so I want to give a shout out to Brian. So check out Michigan Brews. I will put in the description below a link to their YouTube channel. Give them a sub for me. They're a great group of guys, and they do a podcast every week. So I have a lot of other notes to talk about. So the first of all is the price of the beer. I've actually never brewed a beer that this expensive before. The second most highest beer I made was, I believe, the New England IPA, which was my first grain to glass video. I want to say that was around $80 for that keg, but this one definitely takes the cake. If you have not soured before, there's just a lot of extra things, like you need a lot of fruit, you need the lactose strain, so there's definitely some stuff, and also it's higher gravity, so you're going to need more base malt as well, so that naturally brings up the price. A few other notes on souring. Souring with the Lacto Brevis from Imperial yeast was actually pretty unpredictable. I'm not sure if it was just the strain I got, or if it was the strain of the lacto I got, or maybe it was just a one-off thing, or maybe this is common, I don't know, because I just don't have a lot of experience. But for the first 2 days, nothing happened when I pitched my lacto, which was concerning because I thought maybe there was an issue with it. Day 3, it started to drop for me, and then it stalled, which then I raised the temperature up to try to get it going. It dropped like 1 more point, but it wouldn't drop any farther, so I actually had to put a ton more lactic acid in to get it down to the desired pH level for to start my actual brew day with this beer. So I don't know if that's common or uncommon with Lacto Brevis or just lacto strains in general. So let me know in the comment section below your experience with kettle souring. Another thing I just wasn't sure about was how much fruit to add. I used a Midwest fruit tart recipe from a brewery in Ohio. And they recommend 3 pounds of fruit per gallon of beer, which is just too much money for me to do the puree. So I only did 1 pound per gallon of the tart cherry, and maybe it's just because tart cherries are a little bit more aggressive. Like if I were to do like a blackberry or blueberry, you're probably gonna have to use a lot more to get those flavors. But for the tart cherry, actually 1 pound per gallon I thought was great. I was also really concerned with oxygen pickup during the lacto process. I took a lot of precautions with sanitizing and ensuring little movements when it came to the lacto souring process. I don't know how sensitive lacto is with oxygen. I just know it's not supposed to be in there. I could have put it in the fermenter, but I don't have a nice fermenter to take samples from. I just have a plastic bucket. So I figured it'd be easier just to use the kettle for this. But I've heard nightmare stories about like cheese and vomit notes if there's any oxygen introduced during the lacto souring process. So obviously those are things you want to avoid when doing sour. But fortunately, I don't pick up any of those disgusting notes from this beer, which is good. So that tells me I did an okay job with not introducing too much oxygen. Another thing I want to comment on is my gravity was a little odd to measure. When I took my pre-boil, I always take a pre-boil gravity to see how my mash did. And when I took my pre-boil gravity, it did great because I did sparge this time. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it was an issue with my boil off rate. I was only 1 point under my pre-boil gravity, which didn't make any sense. So to be honest, I don't know what the pre-boil gravity was with this, so I don't really know what the ABV is of this. I want to say on the low end, it's probably 7%. On the high end, it's probably 8%. And one more note I want to make, if people are interested in making anything that you add puree to, especially a lot of puree like the fruit sour, is get a floating dip tube. I can't recommend it enough. Get a floating dip tube. It's worth the money. I have had so much sediment in this beer. I've already went through about a gallon and a half of this recipe between me and my wife. And every single time I pour, there is a little bit of sediment that comes out from the bottom of the keg. For the first, I would say 5 pours, there is a considerable amount of sediment. I feel like because of how expensive this beer is, I may have already spent or wasted around $5 to $10 worth of beer, considering all the beer that had just so much sediment in it or needed to be dumped because of the sediment. So that really goes over the brew day notes. I next want to go into appearance, aroma, mouthfeel, and flavor. So for appearance, it has a off-white head. And it is relatively clear. It does have a little bit of a haze to it because of the sediment. Like I said, I don't know if that's ever going to go away. But looking at what I was comparing this to, which is a Midwest fruit tart, all of their beers have a little bit of haze to it. So that's not too surprising considering how much fruit you have to add to these. It's hard to clear that out completely. As far as aroma goes, you definitely can pick up like a lactic acid tartness from the aroma. And obviously because of the cherries, you get a ton of cherry aroma as well, tart cherries. And tart cherries is my favorite fruit, actually. It's my favorite berry. So I really, really dig it. It definitely smells like real tart cherries. I really like the Oregon puree I use. You don't really get much else besides like the lactic acid tartness and the cherry. There's really no perceivable malt characteristics on the aroma. And for hop, there's really no hop characteristics either. It's such a low amount of IBU, and also the tart cherries just take over the aroma, so you can't really get anything more than that. At least I can't. Next we can go to mouthfeel. So with mouthfeel, I would say it's medium to full bodied, and it has a really smooth carbonation as well. I want to attribute that to how much flaked oats we added. I think the flaked oats were like 11% of the grist or 12% of the grist, so it's a lot of flaked oats. I think we used 2 pounds for the mouthfeel, and you can definitely tell it has a nice full-bodied, medium to full-bodied mouthfeel. I really enjoy it with this style. And lastly, we can go into flavor. So for me, I actually haven't drank a lot of sours in my life. I want to say I've probably had less than 5 sours in my entire life. Including this. So I don't really have a whole lot of sours and experience to compare this against. I can say I really enjoy it. It's a really clean lactic acid tartness that you get from this. There isn't really a whole lot of funkiness to it. It's just a really clean flavor. So besides the tartness, the cherries are dominating as well. It's not overly dominating, but you can definitely tell there's tart cherries in this. Now, it is very tart, obviously. But you also do get this subtle sweetness, like almost like a vanilla sweetness on the finish as well. I'm not really sure where that's coming from. probably the cherries. But I didn't add any vanilla to this. A lot of people do add a little bit of vanilla to this, but there's no vanilla added to this, but you still kind of get this weird vanilla flavor. Maybe it's just me. I don't think my wife picked it up. But for me, I can definitely taste a little bit of vanilla in this as well. But anyway, guys, that about covers the Midwest Fruit Tart / Kettle Sour. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. There'll be more content like this coming out in the future. Anyway, guys, I'll see you in the next one.